I'd like to introduce to you our band, all about the music of Bill Evans, and with a fabulous sax player as well. So we've got 45 minutes of fabulous music, and then we're going to have an interval where you can enjoy the wonderful bar supplied by B. Nabley. So here we have the jazz club, well, half of the jazz club house band. Adrian York on piano. Then we have Paul Whitten on the bass. Then we have Mark Fletcher on the drums. Over to you guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on this opening night of this wonderful East Grinstead Jazz Festival. Woo! Yeah, we're really thrilled to be here. And of course, this is the second festival, so, you know, one is quite hard to do, but managing a second one is a big, big deal. So we're very proud and excited to be part of that. I'm sure lots of you recognised our opening tune. What is this thing called Love from Bill Evans' Portrait in Jazz album from 1960. Some of you may know who Bill Evans is, some of you might not. He was born in 1929. He's one of the sort of top 3 ranked jazz pianists, but he was a sort of shy, retiring kind of guy, so he's sort of really respected by musicians. And he came to prominence working with Miles Davis's band, and we'll look at some of that material as we move through the programme. But I suppose, in a sense, he opened the door to modern jazz piano and the kind of the way the contemporary jazz trio works, taking his influences, such as Nat King Cole and Bud Powell and George Shearing, and sort of opening the way for more contemporary pianists like Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, and Keith Jarrett. But as you'll have realised, we're not all about the piano trio today. We have our fantastic special guest with us, Mr. Dave O'Higgins, who I'm going to call up to the stage in a second. But I just want to tell you a little bit about Dave. He's one of the leading lights of British saxophone, has been for a number of years now. But he's worked with just a kind of huge plethora of people, in no particular order: Jamie Cullum, Darius Brubeck, pop band Mac Bianco, Carl Eastwood, Martin Taylor. He's got his own biggish band. He works with young guitar tyro Rob Luft. He's even got a his and hers band with his wife, which is wonderful, the two saxophones. But I always think of Dave as a man who's worked for both Franks, because he has worked with the fantastic Frank Sinatra, but also Frank Butcher from EastEnders, because he did play the theme from EastEnders. He recorded that. Anyway, let's hear it for Mr. Dave O'Higgins. Now, we're in this beautiful church, this sort of delightfully ecclesiastical setting, but imagine you're not. Imagine that this is 1958, September the 9th actually, and that you're in the Plaza Hotel in New York, right on Central Park. Anyone been to the Plaza? You have. Fantastic. I thought you would have. Well, it was a kind of the happening hotel in New York, very centrally located, and there was an event room there where CBS Records were having a corporate do, and if you have Miles Davis signed to your label, who are you going to put on at your corporate party? So there's this recently emerged recording of Miles and the band playing with Bill Evans, which is a rarity because there were no other live recordings of Miles and Bill playing together. So we're going to sort of invoke the spirit of that night. We're in the right place to invoke a spirit, I think. And we're going to start off with the wonderful Frank Loesser tune, If I Were a Bell. So, as I said, 1958, the Persian Room in the Plaza Hotel. Thank you so much. So we're getting a bit warmed up. I've taken off my jacket. I think I don't think so. Anyway, and you're warming up, which is lovely. Lovely to hear you clapping our solos. It's a church, isn't it? Everyone feels a little bit, it's a church. It's a church. I've got to be very polite. But you don't have to be. As I say, let's just imagine you're in a party in the plaza in New York. You've got a cocktail in one hand, a canapé in another, and you're having a good time. So that's the space, that's the atmosphere that we want to create today. Now, Bill Evans was a great lover of a lot of the material that was written for the Disney films. That might seem strange, but those songs provided sort of fertile ground for jazz improvisers. John Coltrane played My Favourite Things endlessly. Miles, again, did lots of the Disney tunes, and so did Bill, coming out of Miles's album. So our next tune is really one of sort of the staples of Bill's repertoire. It's a tune from 1937, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Does everyone remember Snow White? Yeah, of course we do. We all grew up with it, didn't we? Our children grew up with it, and our grandchildren are growing up with it now. So it's written by Larry Moray and Frank Churchill, and this is our version of it. Here we go. Thank you, and I think that tune, in a sense, sums up the essence of Bill Evans's pianistic style. It can be very sweet at times, you know, with the Disney tunes, it's gorgeous. But then there's a spikiness in there, which is unexpected, and some people don't recognise that in his playing, but it's definitely a part of it. Now, we know Bill's in Miles's album, and Bill was a central figure in the making of Kind of Blue, which was recorded and became the biggest selling jazz album ever. It wasn't an album that the musicians who were involved in it at the time realised was going to be so important, but it kind of changed the sound and feel of jazz and opened up the world of modal jazz. And I'm very concerned at this point that there might be some jazz police in the house, because I'm going to do something which is going to get me in a lot of trouble. We're going to play a song called Blue in Green, which was from the album which Bill composed, but we're going to open it with the introduction, the bass and piano introduction to So What, which Bill and also kind of put together. So it's a sort of fusion of those two tunes, and Bill was really upset with Miles Davis because Miles didn't kind of give him any of the publishing on the record. As I say, it was the biggest selling jazz album of all time, so Miles relented and gave him $25. So what can you do? Anyway, so this is So What, segueing into Blue in Green. Thank you so much. Now, I hope you can hear there that something that Bill brought to the world of jazz piano was an essence of the French Impressionist composers such as Ravel and Debussy. And this is a completely new sound within jazz. It was a million miles away from the kind of bluesy related stuff. And Miles Davis in particular loved what Bill brought to the musical table. And he described it as Bill's quiet fire. So we're going to continue now with a little known tune. It's a little bit of a rarity. It's called Loose Blues. Now I have to admit, when I first heard that, I thought it meant loose blouse, but I'm wrong. It's loose blues. Anyway, it's called Loose Blues, maybe with a Scottish accent. I was dreaming, apparently. Yeah. Thanks, Paul. So this is from a 1962 album, which was made with a quintet, featuring the wonderful Zoot Sims on saxophone and the fantastic Jim Hall on guitar. Now, here's the caveat. It took them 22 takes to get it right, and we've got one go. So, wish us luck. Here we go. the oblique and mysterious Loose Blues. We're going to finish this set with a great standard that you'll all know, Cole Porter number, Night and Day. Now, this was a tune that Bill played a lot from his first album, Everyone Digs Bill Evans. It's a song from the film The Gay Divorcee. And we're going to play a version here, which Bill did with the fantastic saxophonist Stan Getz. Everyone heard of Stan Getz? Yeah. He sort of brought bossa nova to the forefront in Western culture with his albums with the divine Astrid Gilberto, girl from Ipanema. So this is our version of Night and Day. It's going to feature our drummer, Mark Fletcher. Let me just say a little bit about the guys in the trio before we finish this set. Mark is kind of a legendary drummer in the UK. He was the person chosen by Ronnie Scott to be his drummer, yes. Ronnie Scott, you know. Yes. So Mark was the house drummer at Ronnie's for many years, backing lots of top American musicians, and he has kind of one of the most authentic feels. He's actually playing the great Tony Levin's drum kit with fantastic new calf skins that he's put on, which is kind of what makes that extraordinarily vibrant tone that he gets out of his drums. But he's also worked with huge stars like Michel Legrand. The list goes on and on. Let's hear it from Mark. And on bass, we have local double bass legend, Mr. Paul Whitten, who's sort of first call in this part of the country. And but that doesn't mean that Paul hasn't played with some of the greats. For a while, he was in Chet Baker's band. Ooh, yeah. So there we go. So that's a trio. But we're going to finish off this set with Night and Day. that's the end of our first half. Ladies and gentlemen, we've loved playing for you. We're going to be back very soon. And hope you enjoy the break. Go and have a drink, get some fresh air. And we'll see you in a few minutes. From the trio, Mr. Dave O'Higgins, Mr. Mark Fletcher, Mr. Paul Whitten, and myself, Dr Adrian York. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for staying in this heat. It's lovely to see you still here. So that was a tune, probably the only jazz tune ever named after a brand of lard. Yeah, Oleo, which is a Sonny Rollins tune, but which again has become a sort of jazz staple, and again was covered by Miles and his band at that infamous Plaza Hotel evening. Now, we're going to move on with a very different kind of tune, something that takes us into a very different sonic and emotional space. A Bill Evans tune called Time Remembered, which he recorded with the wonderful sax player Zoot Sims. And I suppose maybe this takes us in almost into a Proustian space, remembrance of times past, a sort of enigmatic, floating, ethereal space. Time remembered. Thank you so much. The wonderful Time Remembered. We're going to continue with a song that maybe isn't quite right for this time of year, but we're moving towards it. The Joseph Cosma tune that you all know, Autumn Leaves. And this was a tune that Bill returned to many times with many combinations of his trio and with many different artists. And this is our take on Autumn Leaves. Thank you so much. So we're going to just push the tempo up a little bit now. We're going to play a tune, again, another Bill Evans tune, again, a lesser-known one, but that he did record with Stan Getz and a few other of the sax players he played with. Because Bill was really known for his trio performances. That's what he loved to do. In fact, the truth was, Bill didn't really like performing. He preferred to just play at home at night, but unfortunately, he couldn't pay his bills doing that. So the trio was his preferred format. But record companies wanted him to work with other musicians, so Stan Getz was a really good match for him, someone who could match the inventiveness of his sort of melodic flow and an invention. So this is Funkarello, and I believe we start with the drums. We were enjoying it so much, Dave wanted to play the head twice at the end. That's a £20 fine. No, only joking. So, now, as musicians, we're really lucky we get to travel a lot, and lots of us, I think most people here on the stage, have been to Japan several times to play. I started in the 1980s going with a pop band I used to play in called Roman Holliday, and then on from there working with jazz artists throughout the 90s and noughties. So in Japan, they have people in society, older people, who are called living national treasures, which I think is a really good idea. It's people who kind of give to the community. And within East Grinstead, you have one of those, a living national treasure. It's the lady who organises the East Grinstead Jazz Club, and is the co-organiser of this festival. And she's going to be our special guest tonight to come and sing a number, very sort of big Bill Evans tune called My Foolish Heart. So let's hear it for Jenny Green.
No pressure then. What a great band they are. Yes. This tune I found quite a long time ago on a Tony Bennett album with Bill Evans.
Here's one I prepared earlier.
Yes. Oh, there you go. The night is like a lovely moon. Take care, my foolish heart. How wide the ever-constant moon. Take care, my foolish heart. There's a line between love and fascination that's hard to see on an evening such as this, for they both give the very same sensation when you're lost in the magic of a kiss. His lips are much too close to mine. Beware, my foolish heart, and should our eager lips combine, then let the fire start. For this time it isn't fascination or a dream that will fade and fall apart. It's love, this time is love, my foolish heart. are much too close to mine. Take care, my foolish heart, and should our eager lips combine, then let the fire start. For this time it isn't fascination or a dream that will fade and fall apart. It's love. This time is love, my foolish heart. My foolish heart. My foolish heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Was that wonderful? Jenny Green. Not only a cultural entrepreneur, but a fantastic singer. There's not many people who manage both things. So we're coming to the end of our programme. We're going to finish off with a real standard that you'll all know, called Stella by Starlight. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming out and listening to our music. We really appreciate it. Thank you for supporting the festival. And thank you to, on drums, Mr. Mark Fletcher. On the double bass, Mr. Paul Whitten. And on the tenor saxophone, Mr. Dave O'Higgins. I'm Dr. Adrian York. It's been a pleasure playing for you. Hope to see you at lots more of the festival events. Thank you very much, and good night. Thank you to Jenny and the organisers, everyone here, all the volunteers who've really done their bit. Thank you very much.
More. We need. Still got time for one more. Do we want more? I can't hear you. Yeah, we can do one more.
Okay, we can do one more.
Fantastic.
I know people have got trains to catch and
Fantastic.
all sorts of other things to catch.
A nice quick one.
I'm gonna do something different for this last tune. So I'm going to play solo on my own, a tune that is. He's got to get down the pub. It's a tune that I think is absolutely of the moment. It's a tune that Bill wrote that speaks to all humanity now. It's a tune. Could we turn off the background music?
David.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you to Dave for the sound. Sorry, I nearly forgot there. I was getting carried away. So, this tune is called Peace, Peace. Let's just all unwind and calm down and reflect. Thank you.
Adrian York. What a beautiful finish to an amazing show. Thank you so much. I think he's asleep.
Yeah, he's all right. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. See you all again very soon. I'm playing tomorrow with Kayo Brand at the Crown, so maybe see some of you there. And then I'm playing on Sunday again with
jazz
Jenny.
Lunch, sold out.
The sold-out jazz lunch at the
Checkermead.
At the Checkermead. So
Cafe
hopefully
Lawrence.
see lots of you then. Take care. Good night. Thank you.
Woo! So that just leaves me to say thank you so much for supporting the Jazz Festival. It means a lot. And I guess I'll see you around town. Yeah? See you in the morning, 10 o'clock. Coffee in the middle row. Thanks very much. Good night, everyone.